Good afternoon, everybody. I've been asked to do our own introductions. I've already been introduced in the earlier talk I gave, so I won't bore you with anything about me. But I have with me on this presentation Dr. James B. Angus. I'll let Dr. Angus say a few things about himself, but I will mention that he has been a minister for quite some time. He has a Bachelor of Arts from Lipscomb University. He got that in 2006. He's got a Master of Divinity in Biblical Studies from 2009. And he did his doctorate in Pastoral Community Counseling in 2016. He's been an adjunct professor. He's been involved in numerous publications. He's conducted research in a variety of areas, including ministerial stress and burnout, black male stress and burnout, pastoral leadership and theology. And he has extensive involvement in numerous community projects. So it's quite a background. Is there anything else about you that you think this crowd should know, Dr. Angus?
Happily married, have 3 lovely kids and 2 big dogs.
Okay. That's great. I've got 2 lovely kids and 1 fantastic dog, so you got me beat on that one. That's good. I think this is an appropriate event to sort of tie up this whole program that we've been doing, because history, as they say, never dies. It keeps going. And the history of how Dr. Angus and I found each other is absolutely fascinating, and what we've learned about our joint family history is absolutely fascinating as well. Back in July of 2022, I got an interesting email from 23andMe. As I'm sure you all know, 23andMe is the sort of DNA testing outfit that then tells you what your heritage was based upon your DNA. And whenever a new relative shows up in their system, they let you know about that as well. And my wife and I had been members of 23andMe for some 7 or 8 years. And then I got an email telling me that I had some more relatives that I didn't know about. I looked them up, and they were African American. That aroused my interest. And so I reached out to them. And I think the first one I reached out to was Tariq Pillow. He calls himself T. And indicated that I'd love to make contact and talk so we could figure out family history. And he texted me back. I'll read you the text he sent me. He said, "Thank you for keeping an open mind and reaching out. We can't change history, but we can explore it. I definitely love to keep in touch and learn more about the family history." And I texted him back. I said, quote, "I fully understand what you mean by your reference to my having an open mind. You needn't have any concern on that score. My family and I are open-minded liberals and look back in horror at our nation's slavery days. As a descendant of white Southern landowners, I'm fully aware that my ancestors owned enslaved people, and I condemn them for that." We increased our communication. I talked with additional family members, and there were basically, I have a whole lot of cousins I never knew that I had. We decided to get together. Most of them lived in the area near Nashville, Tennessee, central part of the state. And one of my sons, Campbell, was an attorney living in Nashville. And so we agreed, let's meet in Nashville. And we did. We met at a restaurant near there. And there were some, I'd say 8 or 10 of my new cousins. I was there at the meeting, my wife and my son, Campbell. And we really had a fantastic conversation for several hours. We got to know each other. I'll show you a couple of pictures of that meeting in a little bit. And we decided that why don't some of us get together in a few months and visit the area where the old plantations were, slave quarters, whatever remains of those days, so we can really get even more of a on-the-ground idea of our relationship. And we did that. A few months later in summer of 2023 or in the spring, we got together down near Pulaski, Tennessee, and spent some 2 or 3 days traveling around, meeting more people and seeing a lot of the sites. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. That trip involved me, my son Campbell, and a cousin of mine who had grown up there, who was, I'll call it on the white side of the family. And he had no idea about any of what this was all about, but was dying to learn, as we all were. So I'll give you a little bit of background on that. What I'd like to do is just talk for just a couple of minutes about the white side of my family, where they came from and where they ended up. And then Dr. Angus will be able to talk about the other side, and we'll see what happened and what the impact has been, and try to put it into some kind of a much larger social context. My ancestors lived in Scotland. They were Scots from Argyll, and their last name was Campbell. Walter Campbell, as a matter of fact, was the keeper of Skipness Castle in Argyll. But his son, whose name was Matthew Campbell, they called him Matthew Campbell the Rebel. He tried to help what he and a lot of other people thought was the Scottish heir to the British throne. That got him in a lot of trouble, and he ended up being incarcerated by the British government, I believe, on the Isle of Man. He managed to escape, and he fled to Ireland and assumed the last name of Rhea, R-H-E-A, which is my last name. Apparently, he or someone in the family had married a Irish lady whose last name was Rhea, and they decided to take that name to continue to sort of disguise where they were. Well, things didn't work out very well in Ireland either, and so in the mid-1700s, they migrated to the colonies here to America. They settled on the eastern shore of Maryland, and the head of the family at that point, Joseph Rhea, actually founded a church in Piney Creek, Maryland. And that church is still there. I've visited it. There's a little memorial there to him. The rest of his family then and he moved later down into Tennessee, which at that point was just a wilderness frontier. And they settled in the area that's near what's now Bristol, Tennessee, up near the North Carolina border. And then some parts of the family moved on down into the very lower part of Tennessee, up against what's now Alabama, in the area where Pulaski, Tennessee is. Basically, if you look at a map of Tennessee, in the middle of the state is Nashville, which is the capital, and if you go pretty much dead south of Nashville down almost to the Alabama border, you'll see the town of Pulaski, and that's where the relevant portion of my family settled that we'll be talking about today. It was in the area called Giles County later on. The first main figure I want to talk about from the family is James David Rhea, and I happen to have a nice little picture of him here. Let me see if I can make it come up. Yes. James David Rhea was born in 1838 in Giles County. So he was sort of the first of the Rhea generation born down in this, where they finally settled. And they had a small farm there. Some people would have called it a plantation, but it's not like the kind of plantations you think of in South Carolina and those kind of places. These are pretty primitive plantations. They had a few slaves, and he grew up there. There was a neighboring property. It was owned by a gentleman by the name of Thomas Buford, and he was a major figure in the area, had a lot of money, had a large piece of property, was involved in politics, managed to get a major rail line to run nearby. The station that's there is now named, and was named at the time, Buford Station, so he had quite a bit of influence. And James David Rhea, in 1860, proposes to the daughter of Thomas Buford, Mary Elizabeth Buford, or known as Betty Buford, and so those families would come together. I happened to come into possession of the letter that James David Rhea sent to Miss Buford to propose to her. And I just want to read a little bit of it to you so you can get a sense of these people. He writes, "Dear Miss, pardon me, Miss Buford, for using a word so expressive of tender affection, for I can no longer conceal from you my ardent attachment, my unfeigned love. Since our first acquaintance, my regard both for your person and good qualities has been steadily increasing until it has matured into perfect love, and no one is so dear to my heart as the lady whom I am addressing. Could I but have the least assurance of reciprocal feelings, and that our destinies in life may be cast together, happy, happy indeed will be my lot. Heaven itself can grant me no greater blessing on earth. You occupy my thoughts both morn and eve in a pure and refined love, the impulse of which is irresistible, urges me to express to you my feelings. In all the frankness and sincerity then of a true and devoted admirer, permit me to solicit your hand and heart, and to declare to you that on your reply depends my happiness or misery." Now, I should have copied that and used it a couple of times in my life. All I can tell you is it worked for him, okay? And he and Betty Buford were ultimately married in 1863, about 2 years later. Now, interestingly enough, not long after he made that proposal, of course, the American Civil War breaks out. And James David Rhea joins the Confederate armies. He's in the 3rd Tennessee Regiment. And within a short period of time, he's made a captain of one of the companies. And he fights in most of the main battles in the West. He's actually captured at one point and is a prisoner in the Union prisons, manages to escape, apparently by dressing himself up as a nurse and sneaking out. He was no dummy. Anyway, he ends up getting wounded a couple of times, but survives the whole thing. On one occasion, he manages even to sneak back down into Giles County when the Confederate armies are near Nashville, and he gets to visit Betty Buford. He sneaks his way through a Union picket line, actually, to get in there. Later, they found a dead Union picket, so he may have had to actually kill one of the Union soldiers in order to get in to see his wife. In any event, he's in on the surrender of this Western Army in North Carolina in 1865, and then walks all the way back to his farm in Giles County, several hundred miles. So it's quite an ordeal, but he got back. He and Betty Buford have 3 sons. One of them, Clifford Rhea, was born in 1866. James David Rhea II is born in 1870, and he's going to be the important one for what we have to say. And my grandfather, Joseph Campbell Rhea, was then born in 1877. So there's three sons, one of them being my grandfather. Now, Betty Buford, when she came over from the Buford farm, and when she married James David Rhea, also brought over with her some of the enslaved people from the Buford farm. One of these, actually there were a couple of them, but one of them, Austin Buford, plays a part in the story that we're going to be telling you about. James David Rhea the second, that's the son that was born in 1870, was an impressive young guy. He was about 6 feet 5 inches tall when he grew up a little bit, not when he popped out, but a little bit later. In 1898, he marries a lady named Sadie Gardner, and they have a child, James David Rhea III, in 1899. But some interesting things that happened just before then with respect to a daughter of Austin Buford, the former enslaved man that had been brought over from the Buford plantation. So why don't I turn it over to you at this point, Dr. Angus, and you could explain to them a little bit more about some of the folks I mentioned, but also then what happens with respect to to Austin Buford and, of course, his daughter.
All right. So basically, our common ancestor is the captain. Captain James David Ray is my third great grandfather. He was my great grandmother's grandfather. Um, for many years back in Pulaski, since I can remember, I always looked at my grandmother. I didn't think to share a picture with Gordon to show this, but I don't think I got her in there. But I got her mom in there. But I always used to look at my grandmother, and then I'd look at my grandfather, and it was always something different because my grandmother was like a white lady, and my granddaddy was very dark. But my grandmother and all of her sisters, we'll show you one here in a minute, they all looked like they could pass for white if they chose to. Very light skin, very fair features. And I know if you can see the picture on the screen right now, that nose was on every one of those women. And I always used to look and be like, my nose doesn't look like my granny's. Where does this come from? And I can remember talking to my grandmother as a child. I was always the out of all the grandkids, I was the one most attentive to history. I've always had a love and an affinity for history, for Bible, for family genealogy, and it always stuck to me. I can always remember it. To this very day, my family members will tell you if you want to know something, you call James, you call Angus. He'll be able to tell you because he sat up on all the old people and learned this stuff, which I did. I had a cousin just recently tell me she thought I was strange back in the day, but she says, now I see what you were doing. You were trying to find out where we came from. I said, absolutely correct, because I believe that's very important. So it was a time before the DNA, we had been doing all this research. And at family reunions, we would recite the stories we'd always heard. Because in the Black community, the Black family, the stories and narratives of the family are very important. So you retell the stories. So it's kind of like in the Bible in Deuteronomy, when God charges the Moses them to tell the story of Israel. That's the same way you keep your rootedness to who you are, is our retelling the story of where you came from. So we always would talk about this story. So as we grew up, me and my cousin Tart T, we would always talk back and forth about this, and we would try to do research. And then when came the invention of DNA testing, we did that to see what would happen. I had done a ancestry test at first and didn't get any hits, and so I built my family tree up on that one. And then Tarek did the 23andMe, and then I get a text one day saying, "Hey, look at this!" And it was an email from or a text message from Gordon, and I talked to my cousin. I said, "Are you sure we need to be talking to them?" And the reason I say that is being from Pulaski, growing up there, one thing I was always known and told about was my grandmother told me when I was a young kid, the reason I look the way I look is because my mama's daddy was a white man. And I didn't really understand who he was because I think as the story got passed down, sometimes things get enmeshed and things get turned around and they got some things confused. For a while there, they were telling me that my great grandmother's father was a judge. And that was a story I grew up with. And come to find out later, that was a little bit mistaken, and I can understand why. Uh, as we go through this, you're going to hear this name, James David Ray, happen many times over. The name will carry. So when they got to looking for things, the name of the same person gets repeated throughout the family. Like I'm a junior. I didn't name my kids after me. I'm like named after my dad, but it's a series of things. But anywho, where I come into this storyline is through Austin Buford. Austin was born in 1835 on the Thomas Buford plantation out in Beaufort, Tennessee, which is out there in the area, literally to this day, across the road from the Big Creek Farm, where the Rays lived. When Captain James David married his Betty and brought her over, I presume that she brought Austin with her. And then Austin later, after in 1870-ish, he married an Esther Beasley, who became Esther Buford, and they had a daughter by the name of Minnie Buford. We got a picture of Minnie too here in a second. Minnie was the daughter of Austin, and Minnie is the lady sitting down in the chair. And that's her first daughter named Maggie. Maggie is no relation to Gordon in this respect because Maggie had a different father. Maggie was the product of a rape because her mother was 13 and her father was 45. Um, but we're not really sure with how we come in, if that's even a plausible situation. We're not sure. We know that Minnie and James David Ray II were close in age, probably would have known each other growing up because they grew up on the same farm during that time period. But
Yep.
Austin
Yeah, we know
is,
that, obviously, just, I can just throw this in for a second, don't mean to interrupt you, but James David Ray II is born in 1870, and then Minnie is born in 1874, so they're only 4 years apart. He's
yeah,
4 years older than her, and they're growing up right there in the same area, right? Okay.
that's correct. And in those farms back in that time period, you got to think we're post Civil War when nobody's moved anywhere. Black people are still living in the same areas they were living before around white people on these farms or plantations. Nobody's segregated. They're all out there in the country together, so they're in close communication. My people didn't move away from the Big Creek area until later into the 20th century when my great grandfather Max Simmons and his brother Clarence Simmons bought land on what's now known as Apple Hill back in Giles County. Um, and that's where they moved late. They moved away from the Big Creek area and moved out there to Apple Hill. Now, could you, hey, Gordon, show a picture of, let's show a picture of Betty and then show a picture of her son.
Yes.
So that,
Okay. I showed him earlier, let's see, a picture of James David Ray. That's the captain from the Civil War time,
mm-hmm.
the father of James David Ray II. And here's his wife, Betty Buford. It's an old photo of hers taken in 1863.
Which would be my what, third great grandmother?
Yes, that's right. And that would be the mother of James David Ray II, who would be your grandfather. And she'd
Yeah,
be the
my
grandmother,
great-great.
or great-grandfather, and she'd be the great-grandmother, right?
Right.
Okay, and then James David Ray II, I don't have a picture of him as a young man, but here he is as a older person. Come on, machine. Okay, he told me I just needed to tap this thing and it would come up, but it's not.
Double click it.
I'm trying all kinds of that.
Trackpad.
Yep. Ah, there it goes. Okay, there he is. He looks pretty arrogant to me. What do you think?
He's interesting. Here's the crazy part. After meeting Gordon and meeting our cousin Dave Ray and I are closer relation to me and Gordon. Gordon is related to me because this gentleman's brother and Gordon's grandfather, they're brothers.
Yes.
So Joseph Campbell Ray and James David Ray are brothers. And that's how me and Gordon are related. Then you have Dave Ray, our cousin we were talking about earlier. We both came from this gentleman right here. I'll tell you a quick little funny story about Dave Ray and being out there in the Beaufort area. There's a school out there called Richland High School. Dave Ray went to Richland High School. I had a cousin that went to school with Dave Ray. He was actually the youngest grandson of Nellie Beaufort, the daughter of James David Ray. Kevin knew who Dave was, but Dave did not know who Kevin was because Kevin couldn't tell Dave they were related. But they were closer than I am, related to each other.
Right.
Because they were half siblings, grandchildren. That's how close the relation was. But when I saw these pictures that Dave sent me of James David Ray II, it was like the missing link of my family finally had been put in place because I could then start to see how people in my family, particularly my grandmother and her brothers and sisters, my great grandmother and her sister, how they all favored, especially, but no,
All right. Okay.
this is my big mama.
This would be Nellie. right.
And this is her in the older picture. If you go to the one right before this, you see her as a little bit younger.
Okay, let's see. Oops.
The next one.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
To the top right, that's my big mama as a young lady. That's
Mm-hmm.
Nellie Buford, later becoming Simmons. The lady to her left is her sister-in-law, Lula Simmons. The man in front, that's Mac Simmons. And I'll tell you a story about Mac in a little bit as I keep moving.
Sure.
The little girl to the far right, to Mac's left, that's my grandmother, Mary Alice. The one over to the far, to his right side, that's my Aunt Beatrice Simmons Moore. She passed away 6 or 7 years ago. And then the one on his lap is my Aunt Johnny. That's what we call her, Johnny Simmons. These are the three oldest kids. My grandmother was the oldest of 10 kids. There was 5 girls, 5 boys.
Mm-hmm.
And Big Mama was the daughter, if you can see the resemblance of her father in her face.
Right.
She was very light skinned. And what you can't tell by this picture is Mac was too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different part of the family story. But that's the lady I remember people telling me a lot about her. I never had a chance to meet her. My sister did. My mom knew her very well. They all loved her. She would just say what she felt. Very stern, very, very straightforward lady. Um, and she knew who her dad was, but I don't think they had a relationship. But most certainly she knew who her brother was. Her brother was what the guy they would call in the town was Judge Ray.
Right. And that
Judge
her brother
James
would be
David Ray the third.
her brother was the white son of James David Ray II, and her brother's name is James David Ray III, but he was also called the judge because he was a judge. Right.
Yeah.
Right. He was a lawyer and then became a judge.
And he was a state senator at one time too.
Yes.
Which on that side of the family, through Gordon found out that that's a very common thing that people were attorneys or either ministers.
That's right.
So that's pretty interesting to see that. I mean, and to hear the stories we're told about, on one side of the family, I was told a story about the judge having rescued some of my big mama's brothers from being lynched. Because they could, like I said, they looked like they were white. And I think one of the brothers had got a white woman pregnant, which later on I met that lady, but didn't know who she was until I was 24 years old. My dad would not tell me because that lady looked just like my grandmother, spitting image of her. But it was my Uncle Hal, Big Mama's brother's child, who grew up, and to this day, that family still thinks they're white, but they're really black. They're African American. They have it there. But they pass for white. But I couldn't tell them that. Still to this day, I couldn't tell them that. So
One interesting thing that, as we talked over these last many months, that continues to strike me is the fact that on the, I'll call it the black side, just so we can keep them straight,
yes,
everybody seems to have understood that entire family history and known what happened, known that Nellie was the product of a black woman and a white man and who they were. And that's just what everybody sort of knew. But on the white side, at least in my generation, I never heard this. And my father never mentioned it to me. No family member ever mentioned it to me. I don't know if my father knew it or not. But obviously that part of the world, the southern part of Tennessee, that's where the Ku Klux Klan was founded. I mean, racism and racial violence is huge. And I assume that played a big part in what I just described. Is that your understanding of it as well?
yes, pretty much. I mean, that's why we couldn't talk about a lot of things.
Right.
Also, here's another interesting piece of the family history was in 1942 on June the 5th, Big Mama's husband, Mac Simmons, was killed. He was shot in the back in a grocery store out there near Beaufort. And the gentleman who shot him in 1942 was a white man. The thing that really mystified me about this whole situation was that white man actually went to jail for killing my great grandfather. I couldn't believe it. You all know the history. Black people in the South, especially Dallas County, could be killed without any recourse, you know. But for whatever reason, some kind of way, that man actually went to jail for at least 2 years. Um, and later in life, I think he even lived down the road from us in Pulaski, down the hill. My dad would never traverse this one street because that gentleman lived there. He did not want to see that man who killed his grandfather. But he did tell me the story that that man went to jail for that murder. And the only way I think that's very plausible had to be because of my big mama's half brother, who was a judge in that area, who would have political pull to get some things moving to even do that. Because I never, in any kind of history in the South, heard of a white man going to jail for killing a black person at that time period, 1942.
Right. So your perception, as I understand it, is that the judge knows that he's related to your side of the family, but can't say it openly and doesn't want to say it openly, but sort of undercoverly intervenes to help them if it looks like it's necessary. Is that sort of what you think was going on?
It happened a couple of times from how I understand the stories. Because when I talk to some of my white cousins on the Angus side of my family, they've told me stories about interactions between the Rays and the Simmons, where the judge had helped Big Mama after Granddaddy Mac had passed. Because you got to think, she's now a single mother of 10 kids.
Now,
You know,
many who had been helped produce this line and had the relationship with James David Ray II and was the mother of Nellie, she met a terrible end, right?
oh yes. In February of 1918, Minnie was killed. She was shot in the chest, and she was shot in the chest by a man by the name of James Dabney. However, it took us a while to figure that part out. We did a lot of research. My cousin Clary and her brother Earl had went to Pulaski, went through the newspaper articles, and actually found the article that depicted what happened. However, on our side of the family, that's not the story we got. The story we always had was there was some kind of situation. I heard two different stories, don't know if they're true. Things in that time period could be rumor. One rumor was that great grandma Minnie had been talking too much about somebody's child, and the father wasn't helping with it. All of her kids were white, and she's dark, but all of her kids look white. And I guess she was presuming somebody needed to help her, and she was talking out loud about it. They say that's the one reason she got killed.
Right.
Another story we've not got any proof of was that she tried to break a relationship off with James David Ray II, and he had her killed. I don't know anything. I don't know how you could corroborate any of those. Just rumors. But the newspaper said she was shot in the chest by James Dabney, and he had been living with her for about a few years. From what I can understand, is that man had been in jail before. From the newspaper article, said he had shot or hurt somebody before when he was in jail, got out. Somehow they got into a common law situation where they were living together, which back then they probably were in order to make ends meet because it's very hard times in that area. Don't know much about James Dabney. Never heard the name until a couple of years ago.
Okay.
When I found great grandma Minnie's death certificate, I did find it to be interesting. On the death certificate, the cause of death, it literally states gunshot, ? Gunshot accident, ? That was it. My grandmother, excuse me, my grandmother never told me anything about her grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1914. She would have been 4 years old, around about 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old when her grandmother died. So she wouldn't have remembered much. The only one I heard about was definitely Big Mac Simmons when he passed. Because Granny was a grown woman by that time with her own kids. My dad was born the next year after he had been killed. She was pregnant with him when her dad died.
Right.
But it's just an intriguing, rich story between the Rays and the Buford clan of Nellie Buford, Minnie Buford, Austin Buford, because Austin Buford actually started a church called Mount Olivet Baptist Church, which is out there near Big Creek. My aunts and uncles all were baptized in Big Creek out there. So we still have people that live near that area. I think when you all went to Pulaski, y'all actually went up around the corner to Max Simmons' father's house,
Yes.
John Henry Simmons, which is just down the road. It's still sitting up there. Um, it's
Yeah.
just still a lot of rich history still in Giles County of our family. We're just hitting the surface on this.
Right.
This is the picture of Big Mama doing one thing she loved to do, and that's quilt. All of them liked to quilt, and they were good at it. Even my father did quilts. Uh, they could all do that. I have no skill at that, but they were all good at it. And I think they got it from Big Mama.
Yeah. And what strikes me about this picture, you didn't know my father, whose name was Booth Buford, but his facial features look very much like hers. And so just looking at these pictures, I can tell you we're related. There ain't no question about it. This is the old home that Nellie used to live in, right? Up on the hill.
I think you may be, yes.
Yes. And this is very interesting. This picture I'm showing you, here on one side is me, and then next to me is my cousin, Dave Ray, and my son Campbell Ray is sitting back on the couch. The gentleman he's sitting next to is the husband of Claire, right?
Yeah, that's Uncle Alec.
Yes.
That's
And
horrible.
Claire, who looks like a white lady, is a daughter of Nellie's, correct?
That's correct.
And then when I met her there at her house, she was, as I recall it, 90 or slightly over 90, right?
Yes, sir.
And I walked into the room when I met her down there, took one quick look at her and gasped because her facial features were exactly like my father's. Her eyes, her nose, her entire face. I said, there is no question. This lady is related to me. And she is so light-skinned, she could easily pass for white, as they put it. Is that right?
hmm
Yeah. And
that's
yeah.
how they all looked. It was just like Aunt Clara. We just actually just lost Aunt Clara this past January.
Yes, she just died this past year, right? Just in January.
Yeah, because that day y'all got to go there made her really happy. Because she was our historian in our family. She's the one that taught me a lot about this history.
This is her again. Yeah. Yeah, she was quite a lady.
Yep. And there's that nose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's my father. Put a hat on him and on her, and she looked like him. Anyway.
And even down to the eyes, too.
Yeah. Okay.
Gray eyes were there.
And this is a picture, I think, of the house up on the hill where Nellie lived. Correct?
That's okay. The one we just looked at first.
Yes.
That was John Simmons's house.
Okay.
Simmons's dad. This one is the one Big Mama lived in. Here's another interesting piece about this house too. That's the house Austin Buford died in.
Really? Okay.
Minnie's dad died in that house in 1930. He was almost 100 years old. He was born in 1835.
Right.
Born into slavery, got freed, saw the nadir of Black history, lived through the Great Depression, and almost lived through the Great Depression. He lived through the early parts of it and passed in 1930, I think from a stroke. And his wife, excuse me, Esther, I think, was part Native American or Native American, if I'm not mistaken. I think she was I want to say either Creek or Cherokee Native. But on the rolls, they would not list her as what she was because of how dark she was, which goes into a whole nother story of how Native Americans and what they look like and how people change their designation from native to colored was pretty interesting. But I think that's what she was. It took me a while to figure that part out as I've been doing this digging into the history. I've always been told about my Native American roots, but sometimes I don't see it in the historical roles. And I was trying to figure out why. And so I do some more digging and then I start finding these things out. But that house right there, a lot of family reunions happened there many years ago.
I'll bet. By the way, talking about Native American and many people just don't know of those roots. 23andMe was very interesting for me. I not only learned about our relationship, but I also learned that I'm about 4% Neanderthal, which is about as high as you can get on the Neanderthal scale.
I'm two.
Yeah, okay. You're two?
I got two.
You probably got that from my side of the family then.
Well, you do know, recently when I had to go to the doctor, it's really interesting. When they found out that I had a white great grandfather, the first thing they asked me was, "Where is he from? Where are your people from?" And I'm like, "Scotland and Northern Ireland," because they thought I had a blood thing called hemochromatosis because of my lineage. I'm like, because when they told me about it, the doctor looked at me. This is what this could possibly be, but it's usually not in African Americans. How would this be in you? And I had to tell her about my family history. And they said, "Oh, well, because it's that close, we're going to have to look into this." Thankfully, I don't have that. But yeah, I thought it was intriguing that because of that, my doctors wanted to check me for it because of my history. But what I really love about this whole thing, y'all, is that even through all the stuff that our family has gone through, I'm just thankful that there was a day and a time that me, Gordon, and Dave were able to meet and become as close as we've become in these last few years. Actually learning from one another and talking to Gordon is kind of interesting. I like everybody, y'all know I'm a minister here in the Brentwood, Nashville, Tennessee area. And me and Gordon, when we first met, we got to digging into this. And as I was digging, one day I was talking to one of my elders, and we sat there and we kept talking. And by the end of the conversation, I found another cousin. So one of my elders is actually a cousin through the Buford side of our family and is also related to Gordon. So our family tree, as we saw in the first picture of this, it branches out just like that tree.
Yeah.
It comes out from the root, but you really don't know where it's going to take you to. I'm just blessed that I was able to meet some great people in Catherine and Gordon and Dave's boys, Gordon's boys, who've been greatly hospitable, very inquisitive, loving, and kind to us because we really just didn't know what to expect. You know, being from Pulaski, all the things people have seen and experienced in that area and what we were taught and brought about. I'm gonna be honest, if my dad was still alive to this day, he would probably be mad at me for talking about that because of what all the things that happened.
Yeah.
You couldn't talk about these things.
Yeah, like I said, Pulaski area, Giles County, that's the home of the Ku Klux Klan. That's where it got started in December of 1865. Some of the Confederate veterans there had a meeting at Pulaski and formed the Ku Klux Klan, and we know what happened after that. And that's, you know, I had a couple of other pictures, just wanted to wrap this kind of up. This is me standing there with two more of my African-American relatives, right? Which two are those now? That's
Claire Rhea. That's Clara's daughter on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Patrice.
Right.
This is this is Mac Simmons Jr.'s daughter, Patrice. I mean granddaughter. So this is my grandmother's brother's daughter, a granddaughter.
And of course, this is one of the Ray burial sites. And we were visiting some of the tombs. This is J.D. Ray.
Is that number 2, or is that the captain's buried? Is the captain buried over in the military cemetery?
Yeah, he's buried elsewhere, so that would be number 2, I think.
Okay. And this is also located in the white side of Maplewood Cemetery.
Yes. Yep. Now here's another interesting one. This is when we were doing our tour. This is gentleman over here on the far side, there's my son. He had grown a beard that day. I'm sitting next to him. And then my cousin, Dave Ray, is right there at the end. And then here's some more of my relatives. Let's see, that's T there, isn't it? Yeah?
That's T right there.
Yeah.
That's who started.
T is
You
right
and T
next to
started
me.
all this.
Yeah, yeah. And then Claire and
Patrice.
Patrice, right, okay. So there we all are, yucking it up for lunch down in Pulaski. And this is one of the pictures we took right after our initial meeting when we had dinner together. That's me. My wife is just right sort of behind me there, and my son Campbell's looking on the other side of my head, and then the rest are African-American-based family members. Yeah.
That's T to your right, me in the back, and that's Earl. That's Aunt Clara's son.
All right, let me see here, we'll get it. How do you blow it up? Is that, you thought you could? You can't? Okay, that's as big as we can make it, but anyway. Yeah, that was after our first meeting. Okay, well, we could go on forever, but some of these people might be getting hungry, but let me just throw it open to see if there's any questions for a couple of minutes. Oh, my heavens, all kinds of questions. Okay, why don't we start here?
My first mistake is you didn't go on ancestry.com. I'm wondering how this is going to end with 23andMe and the bankruptcy, and if you're going to transfer over to ancestry.com so the rest of us could possibly study it some more.
Well, I don't know, I've found so many cousins, I don't know if I want to even look anymore. I'm full of them.
I mean, we'd like to study.
Oh, you'd like to study them, yes. Now, I urge people to do it. I think it's important that we understand who we are, where we came from.
I'm talking about your family, available on ancestry.com.
Oh, okay. No, the only one I was ever on was 23andMe.
Is it still there? Is it still there? Is it
I know they were going bankrupt. They're probably toast at this point, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what's happened with their records either.
I don't know. I was thinking about downloading my records so I can have them.
Yeah.
Because I think you can get your DNA information and store it on your personal stuff.
Will you guys be co-authoring the family story? Is a book about this?
Okay, we just got asked if we would be doing a book about all of this, and you know, I have not put that out of my mind. If I ever finish up being an attorney general, which I think is going to happen in the next year and a half or so, then this is definitely one story that would be worth putting together into a book. I know a gentleman by the name of Ed Ball, who did a book. He's from South Carolina, and he was from one of the big plantation families just north of Charleston. He's a historian, and he did a book several years ago. Some of you may have seen it or read it, called Slaves in the Family, in which he looked at some of these circumstances that he had come from. I don't think he had any relatives in that sense, so it wasn't really people who had been enslaved and he was related to them by blood, but his family had enslaved people and held them there on the plantation, and that's pretty much what his book was about. But no, it's this. It's extraordinarily widespread in the South, denied, obviously, in most instances, and because of the history of racism, I think it's an important nut to crack, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, such an American story. It's just
A very American story. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And even if it makes white people feel bad, I still think our president should let us talk about it. Okay? Anyway, he will, okay. Yes.
For Pastor James, I'm curious because I know that the Creek Indian tribe did have slaves. There was a Chief Red Eagle, William Weatherford, and he was in Tennessee or Alabama. And the 23andMe, I'm curious because you have to have the samples. And I don't know that they have a lot of the Native American samples, and that might be why there's a problem trying to get that information. But I think that's really interesting, especially due to the fact that, if you have enough of the Native American, there are benefits to that for different things too, and of course the history.
That is what I've been told. I have been really wanting to do, and I hadn't found anything yet, but I wish there was a test that could tell me exactly how much of a percentage of what Native American I am. But like you said, there's not that much data for that just yet. Hopefully, I'm optimistic that in the future, our near future, we'll probably have more of that happen. And one day I'll get to actually know exactly what I have in me. I mean, I know on the African and the white side, I can tell you I'm Igbo Nigerian and Benin and Togo. And I can tell you I'm Scottish and I'm Irish. And I got a double shot of Scottish if you look at the Angus and the Ray. And I named my son Jameson.
Hey, James,
Yes, sir.
what relationship are you with this
I'm
gentleman
looking for
over
Zoom
here?
in.
Are you cousins?
Yes, me and Gordon are cousins.
Right.
Are you first cousins or second cousins?
I think we're third cousins is what they call it. Is that right?
Yeah, be around in that third area.
Okay.
Right, because
Thank you.
our common ancestor would be my grandfather's brother. So,
Their cousin, but yeah.
right. So I think we're third cousins. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Angus, this question is for you. I asked this of Gordon last night at dinner. I'm curious about your thoughts. I understand your apprehension that you expressed when Gordon first contacted your side of the family about talking further about this issue. I mean, not because I know Gordon, but because I understand the the apprehension. But I guess I'm curious. Can you imagine if the entire country were somehow, it was made possible that all of us tested over ancestor, one of these DNA tests. And I'm just curious, how do you think that might change how we see one another and how we see the issue of race in this country?
I think if people actually would take that time to do it, they would find out a lot more about themselves that they didn't know about. Because I know for a fact there are a lot of white people that don't know they're black in this country. They don't know their history a lot of times because sometimes some people may be adopted, you know? Because the interesting thing about back then, some people, like white women, if they had a black baby and that baby came out real light skinned, they knew one day that child would probably get darker. So they might put that child up for adoption. And then the child may not darken. The child might stay that way, which is a very real chance, you know? And so in those time periods, one thing I've run into a lot of in this research, I've been helping my wife do hers, is we keep running into these situations like in that second or third generation, right around the turn of the century, early 20th century, running into a lot of people saying, well, in our family, this person was adopted or this person was this. And then you go in and start listening to the descriptions of the family members. And to me, when I hear them, I hear something totally different. I'll be like, oh, that sounds like a mulatto. You know, when they start talking about how they looked and the certain things, black people, it's kind of interesting. A lot of the times, black people from families like mine can look at people who look white and tell you if they're black. And it's all because of how their hair looks. There's a certain texturized to their hair that like a lot of people never pay attention to. Especially like back in the day, if a person knew they had a black lineage, you might have that one white aunt that never liked to go in the sun. Why did she go to the sun? Why does she always wear gloves? Stuff like that would be like trigger points. We'd be like, we know what's going on right there. But I think if people knew their history, it wouldn't divide us. Now it's gonna be, I mean, it's painful things there. Me and Gordon had talked about this too. I mean, there are painful things right there. You know, you acknowledge the painful things, but then you look at what you have in front of you today. There's nothing either one of us could do about anything that happened before we got here. But we can do a whole lot of what's standing in front of us, you know? And what we did when we talked is we acknowledged the things of the past. We acknowledged the pains. We understood those pains. We mourned and lamented those pains. And now we're working forward to a new future together as relatives.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all in this world together, so let's work together and make it right. I'm 100% with you, 100%. My gosh. Amen. No, I don't, he's the amen guy, he's the preacher. Come on now. I'm a lawyer, so come on. Okay, well, objection. Any final questions here? Okay, I can see everybody's really getting hungry. All right. Well, Dr. Angus, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I think everybody here is really excited, really enjoyed this presentation. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all for having me. I appreciate this invitation to be a part of this.
And
Sorry
we
I
will-
couldn't be with you all.
Okay, and we will stay in touch.
All right, Gordon, you take care, man.
You got it.
Thank y'all.
Okay.